Hey gang, this is Greg Barron again, aka the Professor, and today I'm going to talk to you about 5 things that I usually use for an investment scorecard when I'm purchasing real estate. Have you sat there time and time again and wonder, what are we going to watch now since our Netflix program is over with? Well, last week my wife and I started watching Game of Thrones again, and I came up with this analogy. You remember Melisandre in Game of Thrones? Those of you who have watched it, she is the priestess of light. She's this gorgeous woman that appears to help the Baratheons in their quest for the 7 kingdoms. So I've called this section Game of Deals, Hidden Hags. Real estate is a lot like Melisandre. She comes in all beautiful, and then there is one scene where she looks at the mirror, she takes her choker off, and she turns into this hag of a woman. And I thought to myself, real estate is a lot like that. There's a lot of beautiful deals out there that come to you. Brokers are great about giving you their offering memorandums that look beautiful. They're in 4-color. They've been done by a professional graphic artist. But you got to get down into the details every time to discover if that particular deal is going to fit your investment profile, or even if it's even a good deal at all. So I want to talk to you about 5 things that I use for my scorecard every time I evaluate a real estate project. And I don't care if it's a single family home, a fourplex, multifamily with multiple doors, a medical facility, or as we're going to discuss today, a retail power center. Every time you look at a deal, you need to have a franchise system that you use over and over and over again as you evaluate the deal, so you will not put any of your emotion into it. So those 5 things that we're going to discuss are cash on cash return, internal rate of return, or as they say now, XIRR, debt service coverage ratios, equity multiples, and going out cap rates. Now don't freak out just yet on all of those acronyms, because I'll explain it once we get into some software in just a minute. I was recently at a capital investment event, and the one thing that everyone said that was trying to lend money is, come to us with a solid financial modeling prospectus first. If you don't know how to do that, you don't have any business being in the real estate investment business. Until you do those 5 things, or at least have a scorecard in financial modeling, you really don't need to look at the location, the tenant quality, or the absorption rate, or those other things that I would call the demographic profile of the property. So I'm going to jump right into this evaluation. And again, this is fresh off the press. I just got this offer memorandum 2 weeks ago. So it's a project that's on the market right now, late in 2023, with all the bells and whistles, all the pretty brochures to go along with it. I've been given a full set of financials. I've been given all the expenses, all the tenants, all of their CAMs, all of their incomes that they're paying per square foot. I've already preloaded that into the software. But what I want to pay attention to today are those 5 things in particular. And unless you get those 5 things down, you don't need to go any further. So just to give you a broad overview of the project, this one is an existing project. It's fully leased out except for one small tenant space of 1,500 square feet. It has 164,000 square feet of retail area, and many of those tenants are big name tenants. I'm going to make a few up to protect the innocent. Let's just say it's a Michaels, a Burlington Coat Factory, a regional bank, so on and so forth. It's got a few infills with some restaurants and some other things. It's situated on about 16 acres, fully built out, and all of these leases are what we call fairly stable. So you would think that this particular facility is prime for an investment. But let's see if we can undress it, take the choker off, and see if it's a hag or if it's something that we might be interested in. So I'm going to cloud out most of the information to protect the innocent, but you can see it's a power center with several major retailers involved in this. I would say there's 3 significant tenants, and most all the tenants have a 5-year term on their leases that's already been executed with a couple of options. So by all indications, this thing looks like a pretty good deal, and it might be. I've preloaded the information. Oh, by the way, it's $24 million acquisition. And you're going to say, oh, that's a huge deal. I only want to know how to really invest in a single family home that I rent when the market turns and maybe a duplex. But I guarantee if you learn the fundamentals of this scorecard system, you'll understand the basic tenets of how to do financial modeling on the smaller and the larger, like I'm getting ready to show you. By the way, if you're enjoying the content, be sure and hit that like and subscribe button for me. If you've got some comments, be sure and let us know. We try to reach out to as many as we can. So those 5 things that I'm looking at again are cash on cash return, internal rate of return, equity multiple, debt service coverage ratio, and going out cap rate. So just to give you an idea of what our investment committee looks at, basically on a cash on cash return, that's taking our equity that we put into it and realizing a specific return on that cash year over year. That's going to be a little bit different on what we call a stabilized real estate investment. That means that it's fully leased up and we're purely looking at the numbers, the income or revenue, the operating expenses, and then what the net operating income would be after you take the income minus the operating expenses. If you've watched my prior videos, we've already talked about what a cash on cash return is, but it's real simple. Cash in and percentage return that we receive year over year. Your internal rate of return is just simply the compounding effect of all your cash flows plus the exit price that you get for it minus your expenses, and it gives you a cumulative return over the number of years that you've held the property. Debt service coverage ratio is merely the amount of your debt service in relationship to your net operating income. Equity multiple is a simple number. It's usually if you have $1,000 and you put it in a project and you get $2,000 back, it's a 2x multiple on your original investment. Capitalization rate, or as we call it in the industry, cap rate, is always expressed as a percentage. Typically, as a percentage grows higher, the value of your property goes lower. And inversely, as the cap rate goes down, the value of your property goes up. Don't worry about that right now. We're going to show you a few examples that might help you understand how you make that determination on your particular project. So let's hop into the software right quick. As you remember from the last video, this is ProformaPlus. It's not quite out yet. I don't believe it'll be released till sometime next year. In our business environment today, we might have to go through 100 properties to find out that one that might even make the initial grade. So having ProformaPlus, which I found is the most accurate, the quickest, and most efficient software to do that initial financial modeling to make those first determination, whether it's a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So I've been given all this information ahead of time so that I have preloaded most of the information. So we'll go over the summary real quick so I can point out those 5 things. So remember, this is a $24 million major retail power center with multiple tenants, and actually it's got a fairly good tenant mix. So we've already entered the $24 million, in this case, as the initial cash investment before I put any debt on it. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and enter all of my building income, and it just so happens that I preloaded everything, including common area maintenance, because it was given to me. So you can see here we've got a bistro, we've got a nail salon, we've got a Michael's and a Mardell's. We've extended their building square footage and the lease rate to come up with the total lease income. This automatically ports back over here year by year to my effective operating income before I burden it with any operating expenses at all. And this is real simple. The next thing that we want to do is we want to load all the annual operating costs. Again, these are given to me. So I simply go in here. So I tab on each individual tab, and we've broken it down into 4 areas: management services, facilities, taxes and insurance, and utilities estimates, the 4 biggies that we normally have. We've entered property management at this amount. We come down here to facilities, and we've already preloaded everything from electrical, plumbing, sprinkler, roof repair, bank fees, everything that relates to an operating cost I've entered. We do the same thing for taxes and insurance and for our utilities. In this case, these are historical figures that are accurate. So again, this is a real life deal. So as we come back up here to the project center, this is what we call an unlevered project. It has no debt on it right now. So since this is unlevered, it won't have a debt service coverage ratio because there's no debt on it. It won't have a debt yield because it has no debt on it. So as we look at it from the beginning, it looks like a pretty decent deal. Before tax, cash on cash, first year 21%, next year is 22%, and for the subsequent years. So this is a good project if I'm paying all cash, but I'm not. So we are going to put leverage on this, so this will be a levered project. So I go back into my capital stack, which basically, in layman's terms, it's how much the amortization payments are going to be on the project. So I go back into senior debt, and it's real simple. I just determine, based upon my term sheets from the bank, what kind of interest rate I'm going to have, what term I'm going to have, and how many years that project or that loan is going to be amortized over. So let's change this interest rate to something that's reasonable today. It's going to be 8%. I'm going to leave my term at 7 years. I'm going to leave my amortization period at 20 years. And then we're going to go down here and recalculate, which will determine my payments. I'll go back up into my project center, save this again, and watch and behold as a debt service now gets placed. So since I am going to put debt on it, I'm going to go back into my capital stack, and I'm only using senior debt on this particular project. Then I'll go back in here and I'll say, what is the bank going to require of me as a loan to cost? Well, guess what? Right now, they're requiring 55% loan to cost at minimum. My interest rates are at 8%. I'm going to keep a 7-year term and a 20-year amortization. Let's go ahead and calculate and save that. And then move back up into the project center and then save and recalculate again. And lo and behold, we have debt service on the project, or as we call it now, a fully levered project. As you can see, now we have at those rates, at 55% loan to cost, 8% interest rate, our senior debt is right around $112,800 a year on this particular project. Now, one thing you need to remember when we start talking about a cash-on-cash rate, we have what's called a risk-free rate. Today, at the time of the filming, that risk-free rate is right at 4.22%. That means I don't have to do anything. I can invest it in a 10-year treasury bond and yield 4.2%, and I don't have to mess with tenants. I don't have to look at operating expenses. I don't even have to deal with employees. So as a cash-on-cash investment, it's got to be several hundred basis points above that risk-free rate before it's even something that I want to take a look at or take any risk with. So going back to my cash-on-cash return, from ProformaPlus, you can see that the cash-on-cash rate of return, based upon the debt that I just put on it, is 3.1 to 2.8 to 2.64% a year. So far, it hasn't made the grade. So right out of the gate, my cash-on-cash return is not giving me my risk-free rate that I can get for doing nothing. So instead of throwing the baby out of the bathwater just yet, let's go ahead and go through the exercise. Even though the cash-on-cash return doesn't meet our risk-free return, I still want to show you on this project what our debt service coverage ratio would be. And as we see, once we lever it, we've got a 1.28, a 1.23, and a 1.22. I don't know if you remember from my last video, but I said that the bank in their term sheets right now aren't going to lend us anything unless it's at least a 1.35 or higher. What that means is our NOI is 35% greater than our debt service for that particular year. So in category 2 in DSCR, I still got a thumbs down. Now in this particular software, I'm able to show as many scenarios as cap rates as I can come up with, but I've only loaded 3. And as you'll see, I've got 5%, 5.5%, and 6% for cap rates. In this particular market, I probably couldn't get much lower than a 6% cap on a power center of this type. But just for grins, let's see where the internal rate of return would come out on this project with the information that we've loaded in. And as we look at this, you'll see how sensitive incremental increases to cap rate values affect the value of the going out internal rate of return. So if this were a 5% cap, the projected sales price would be $32 million based upon the NOI. At a 5.5, it would be $29 million, but in a more realistic term, it drops $5 million all the way to $27 million, which with this information has a going out internal rate of return before tax of 8.79. Let me just say that there's not an investor out there that would probably want to do this deal with that kind of a cap rate going out. So in all fairness, this particular investment wasn't set up for somebody that was going to put any leverage on it, or said in another way, that was going to put any debt on it. It was really set up as an all-cash deal only, fully stabilized, with tenants that had leases for the next 5 or 6 years. But unfortunately, after we put 50% down, after I've loaded all the data points in, it doesn't meet any of my criteria for my particular scorecard. So I would have to say, for this purposes and this evaluation, it's a thumbs down. So in this particular game of deals, I wouldn't say that it's a hidden hag, but for me, I'm not going to be able to partner up with it. This is complicated stuff, but it's essential for anything that you do. I hope you use this scorecard in all the real estate investments that you look at. Also, I hope that you get some kind of software, something like ProformaPlus, to be able to load this data in to quickly evaluate. By the way, you're going to want to join me next week. We're going to talk about 2024 predictions as I see it as it relates to the financial markets and real estate. I appreciate all of you joining us for our YouTube channel. We hope you find the information interesting as it relates to your future financial investments. And as I always like to say, educate, evaluate, so you can properly execute to preserve and increase your own personal wealth.